The forest on the moon of Orlis IV was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. Its trees glowed faintly in hues of blue and green, their leaves shimmering like liquid light. Strange creatures darted between the trunks, some with translucent bodies that refracted the dim sunlight into rainbows, others emitting soft clicks or chirps as they moved. It was a place of wonder and danger. Lila stood at the edge of the glowing woods, her boots sinking slightly into the mossy ground. She wasn't supposed to be here alone, but curiosity had gotten the better of her. Her crewmates back at the research station were busy analyzing soil samples or tinkering with equipment, leaving her restless. Lila hated being cooped up indoors for too long. She craved adventure, even if it meant wandering off without permission. She adjusted the strap of her utility pack and took another step forward, her eyes scanning the surroundings. The air smelled metallic yet sweet, an odd combination that made her nose wrinkle. "Nothing to worry about," she muttered under her breath, trying to reassure herself. After all, this mission was supposed to be routine, a quick survey of Orlis IV's ecosystem before moving on to more important tasks. But then she saw it. At first, it looked like just another plant, a cluster of vines hanging low from one of the luminescent trees. But as she approached, something about them seemed wrong. They pulsed faintly, almost imperceptibly, as though alive. Intrigued, Lila knelt down to get a closer look. Up close, the vines were slick with moisture, their surface glistening unnaturally. Tiny nodules dotted their length, each one pulsating rhythmically, like miniature hearts. "What are you?" she whispered, reaching out instinctively. Before she could stop herself, her fingers brushed against one of the nodules. Instantly it reacted. A sharp sting shot through her hand, and she yanked it back with a gasp. Something small and needle-like had pierced her skin, leaving behind a tiny pinprick of blood. For a moment, panic gripped her chest, but when no immediate pain followed, she forced herself to calm down. "It's fine," she told herself firmly. "Probably just some harmless defense mechanism." Still, unease lingered as she stood up and glanced around. The forest suddenly felt darker, quieter. Even the glowing trees seemed dimmer now, as if the life had been drained from them. Shaking off the feeling, Lila turned to head back toward the research station. Whatever those vines were, she'd report them later. Right now, she needed to leave. As she walked, however, she couldn't shake the sensation that something was following her. Every rustle of leaves sounded louder than it should have, every shadow stretched longer. By the time she reached the clearing where the station lay, her heart was pounding in her ears. Unbeknownst to her, the parasite had already begun its work. Back at the research station, Lila tried to shake off the unease that had settled over her like a heavy cloak. She entered the habitat module, its sterile white walls and humming equipment offering a stark contrast to the alien wilderness outside. Her crewmates were scattered around the room, each absorbed in their own tasks. No one noticed her slip inside. "Hey, Lila!" called out Grayson, a tall man with scruffy brown hair who was hunched over a microscope. "Where've you been?" "We were about to send out a search party." "Just exploring," she replied casually, avoiding his gaze as she dropped her utility pack onto a nearby table. "Thought I'd check out the forest while everyone was busy." Grayson raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. He knew better than to argue with Lila's wandering spirit. Instead, he returned his attention to the sample under the lens. "Well, don't go too far next time. You know how Commander Drake feels about solo excursions." Yeah, Lila muttered, waving him off. But as she turned away, her hand instinctively went to the spot on her wrist where the vine had pricked her. It didn't hurt anymore, just felt slightly tender, but there was something strange about it. The skin around the puncture mark had taken on a faint bluish tint, almost matching the glow of the forest trees. She dismissed it as nothing serious and decided to clean up. After grabbing a first aid kit from the supply closet, she retreated to her quarters, closing the door behind her. Sitting on the edge of her bunk, she carefully examined the wound again. The blue tinge seemed to pulse faintly, mirroring the rhythm of her heartbeat. Was it her imagination, or did the mark look bigger than before? Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden wave of dizziness. Lila swayed, gripping the side of the bed to steady herself. For a moment, the room spun, and her vision blurred. When clarity returned, she found herself staring blankly at the wall, her mind filled with fragmented images, flashes of glowing forests, writhing vines, and something else. Something dark and shifting, just beyond her reach. "What the hell?" she whispered, shaking her head to clear it. Whatever that was, it left her feeling drained, as though some invisible force had siphoned away her energy. Determined not to let it bother her, Lila finished cleaning the wound and bandaged it hastily. She told herself it was probably just fatigue catching up with her. Long days analyzing data and running tests could do that to anyone. Still, as she lay back on her bunk, sleep eluded her. Every time she closed her eyes, those flashes returned, the pulsating vines, the eerie shadows, the sense of being watched. The next morning, things only got worse. Lila woke up groggy and disoriented, her muscles stiff and aching as if she'd run a marathon in her sleep. Her reflection in the small mirror above her desk confirmed her suspicions. Dark circles ringed her eyes, and her complexion was unusually pale. Even her usual vibrant energy seemed muted, replaced by a gnawing restlessness she couldn't explain. Breakfast with the crew was awkward. She picked at her food without appetite, earning concerned glances from Grayson and Mia, the team's biologists. "You okay?" Mia asked finally, her voice soft but probing. "You look like you haven't slept in days." "I'm fine," Lila snapped, more harshly than intended. Seeing Mia flinch made her feel guilty, but she couldn't bring herself to apologize. There was something clawing at the edges of her mind, demanding attention, and she didn't know how to make it stop. Later that afternoon, during a routine meeting with Commander Drake, her behavior drew even more concern. Normally sharp-witted and quick to contribute, Lila sat slouched in her chair, barely responding to questions. At one point, Drake leaned forward, his stern expression softening slightly. "Are you feeling unwell, Lila? You're not acting like yourself." "I'm fine," she repeated, forcing a brittle smile. "Just tired, that's all." But Drake wasn't convinced. As soon as the meeting ended, he pulled her aside. "Listen, I don't care what kind of tough act you're putting on. If something's wrong, we need to know about it. This mission depends on all of us staying alert and focused." His words should have reassured her, but instead, they triggered another wave of dizziness. This time, it came with a surge of emotion so intense it nearly knocked her off her feet. Anger, fear, desperation, all swirling together in a chaotic storm. She clenched her fists, nails digging into her palms, until the feeling passed. "I'll be fine," she said through gritted teeth, pulling away from him. "Just give me some space." Drake watched her go, his brow furrowed with worry. Something was definitely off, and he couldn't shake the feeling that it had something to do with her unsanctioned trip into the forest. By evening, Lila's condition had deteriorated further. The bluish mark on her wrist now covered most of her forearm, spreading outward in jagged lines that resembled roots. She caught glimpses of it in passing reflections and quickly covered it with long sleeves, unwilling to face questions she couldn't answer. That night, the dreams came again, vivid, suffocating nightmares that left her gasping for air. In them, she wandered endlessly through the glowing forest, pursued by something unseen yet unmistakably malevolent. The vines reached for her, wrapping around her limbs, pulling her deeper into the shadows. And always there was a voice, a low, guttural whisper that echoed in her ears, speaking words she couldn't understand but somehow felt in her bones. When she woke up screaming, soaked in sweat, the others rushed to her side. Grayson held her shoulders, trying to calm her down, while Mia checked her vitals. But Lila pushed them away, her eyes wild and unfocused. "Leave me alone!" she shouted, backing into a corner of the room. "You don't understand. None of you understand." And maybe they didn't. Because deep down, Lila knew the truth. Whatever had infected her wasn't just a parasite. It was changing her, twisting her thoughts, feeding on her fears, turning her into something she no longer recognized. And worst of all, she didn't know how to stop it. The next few days blurred together for Lila, a haze of paranoia and exhaustion that left her barely functioning. She avoided the others as much as possible, retreating to the farthest corners of the station whenever she could. Her once bright personality had dimmed into something cold and distant, replaced by an unrelenting sense of dread that gnawed at her every waking moment. Mia was the first to confront her head-on. "Lila, you can't keep shutting us out," she said one morning, cornering her in the kitchen module where Lila had been staring blankly at a cup of lukewarm coffee. "Whatever's going on with you, we're here to help. But you need to talk to us." "I'm fine," Lila muttered, keeping her gaze fixed on the steaming liquid. Her voice lacked conviction, even to her own ears. She knew Mia wouldn't buy it, nobody would, but admitting the truth felt impossible. How could she explain something she didn't fully understand herself? "You're not fine," Mia countered gently, sitting down across from her. "You look like you haven't slept in days, and you've been acting different. Like you're scared of something, or someone." She hesitated before adding, "Is this about what happened in the forest?" Lila's hand tightened around the mug so hard her knuckles turned white. The question hit too close to home, stirring up memories she'd been trying desperately to suppress. Images of writhing vines, glowing trees, and that guttural whisper flooded her mind again, making her chest tighten with panic. "I don't know what you're talking about," she snapped, standing abruptly and nearly knocking over the chair behind her. "Just leave me alone, okay? I don't need your pity." Before Mia could respond, Lila stormed out of the room, leaving the half-empty mug behind. She hated how weak she sounded, how transparent her lies were becoming. But more than anything, she hated the growing awareness that she wasn't fine, and might never be again. That night, the dreams returned worse than ever. This time, the forest wasn't just haunting her subconscious, it felt alive, pulsating with a sinister energy that seeped into her very soul. The vines reached for her again, but instead of pulling her deeper, they began to fuse with her skin, spreading tendrils of light across her arms and legs. The bluish marks that had plagued her waking hours now glowed brighter, burning like ice against her flesh. And then came the voice. It started as a faint murmur, indistinct yet insistent, echoing through the dreamlike static. As it grew louder, Lila realized it wasn't speaking in words, at least, not ones she understood. It communicated through emotions, flooding her mind with feelings so raw and overwhelming they threatened to consume her entirely. Fear, anger, hunger, all twisted together into a cacophony of chaos. But beneath it all was something else, a command. A demand? "Feed!" The word reverberated through her skull, sharp and unyielding. For a moment, she resisted, clawing at the ground as if trying to escape the invisible force pressing down on her. But the compulsion was too strong. Against her will, her body obeyed, moving towards something unseen in the shadows. When she woke up, gasping for air, she found herself crouched on the floor of her quarters, trembling uncontrollably. Her hands were pressed flat against the cold metal surface, fingers splayed wide as though gripping something, or someone. Panic surged through her when she noticed scratches etched into the floor, deep gouges that hadn't been there before. "Oh no, oh no, no, no," she whispered, backing away until her back hit the wall. Tears streamed down her face as realization dawned. Whatever was inside her wasn't content to stay dormant anymore. It wanted out, and it would stop at nothing to get what it needed. By the third day, the crew couldn't ignore the changes any longer. Grayson was the first to notice something truly alarming. He'd been reviewing surveillance footage from the station's internal cameras when he spotted something odd. In one clip, Lila stood motionless in the hallway outside her quarters, her head tilted at an unnatural angle as though listening to something only she could hear. Then, without warning, her eyes flashed, an eerie blue glow that matched the marks spreading across her skin. "Drake, you need to see this," Grayson said urgently, calling the commander over to his workstation. They watched the footage together, both men growing increasingly uneasy as the implications sank in. "That's not normal," Drake murmured, rubbing his temples. "What the hell is happening to her?" Neither of them had an answer, but they agreed on one thing: they couldn't wait any longer to intervene. If Lila posed a threat, not just to herself but to the entire team, they had to act fast. Their opportunity came later that evening, when Lila emerged from her quarters looking more disheveled than ever. Her hair was tangled, her clothes rumpled, and her movements jerky, as though she were fighting some invisible battle within herself. When Grayson approached her cautiously, she flinched, her wild eyes darting around the room like a cornered animal. "Lila, listen to me," he said, holding up his hands in a placating gesture. "We're worried about you. Let us help." For a split second, she seemed to soften, her shoulders sagging as though the weight of everything finally broke through. But then her expression hardened again, and the glow in her eyes intensified. Her lips curled into a snarl, revealing teeth that looked sharper than they should have been. "Stay away from me," she growled, her voice low and distorted, almost unrecognizable. "You don't understand what it wants. None of you do. What does it want?" Grayson asked, taking a cautious step closer despite the danger. "Tell us, Lila. We can figure this out together." But she didn't respond. Instead, she bolted, moving faster than anyone thought possible. Before anyone could react, she disappeared into the maintenance tunnels beneath the station, leaving the others scrambling to follow. Inside the cramped, dimly lit passages, Lila moved with purpose, guided by instincts she didn't fully control. The parasite's influence was stronger here, feeding off her fear and desperation, pushing her towards some unknown goal. Behind her, the sound of footsteps echoed, growing louder as the others closed in. She stopped suddenly, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Ahead of her, the tunnel opened into a larger chamber filled with machinery and exposed wiring. Something about the space felt wrong. The air was thick with static electricity, and the hum of the equipment seemed louder, almost deafening. And then she saw it. In the center of the room stood a massive cocoon-like structure, pulsating with the same bluish light that now covered her body. It hadn't been there before, or maybe it had, hidden in plain sight until the parasite revealed its presence. Whatever it was, it called to her, its pull irresistible. As the others entered the chamber, shouting her name, Lila stepped forward, her resolve crumbling under the parasite's relentless demands. The last thing she heard before succumbing completely was Grayson's voice, pleading for her to fight back. But it was too late. The cocoon opened, and the parasite welcomed her home. The moment Lila stepped into the cocoon, it was as though time itself slowed to a crawl. The glowing structure enveloped her completely, its tendrils wrapping around her body like living ropes. She tried to scream, but no sound escaped her lips, her voice stolen by the overwhelming force holding her captive. The bluish light intensified, pulsating in sync with the parasite's demands, until she could see nothing else. Inside the cocoon, Lila felt her consciousness fragmenting. Memories of her past life flickered like dying stars, laughing with her crewmates over dinner, marveling at the alien forest's beauty, staring out at the endless expanse of space from the station's observation deck. Each memory dissolved into darkness, replaced by new sensations, cold, electric currents coursing through her veins, reshaping her very essence. Her thoughts became muddled, overtaken by an alien presence that whispered promises of power and purpose. Outside, Grayson, Mia, and Commander Drake stood frozen, their flashlights casting shaky beams across the cavernous chamber. They watched in horror as the cocoon sealed shut, swallowing Lila whole. The air grew heavier, charged with an energy that made their skin prickle. None of them dared to move closer. What is that thing?" Mia stammered, clutching Grayson's arm for support. Her voice trembled with equal parts fear and disbelief. "I don't know," Grayson replied, his jaw clenched so tightly it hurt. "But we have to get her out of there." Before anyone could act, the cocoon began to shift. Its surface rippled like liquid, forming strange patterns that resembled veins or circuits. A low hum filled the room, growing louder by the second, until it vibrated through their bones. Then, without warning, the cocoon split open, and Lila emerged. But she wasn't the same. Her once familiar features were distorted, her eyes now fully consumed by an unnatural blue glow. Her hair floated slightly, as if caught in an invisible breeze, and faint lines of light traced along her skin like circuitry. Most unsettling of all was her expression, or lack thereof. Gone was the warmth and humanity they had known. In its place was something cold, calculating, and utterly alien. "Lila?" Drake ventured cautiously, taking a hesitant step forward. His hand hovered near the stun gun holstered at his side, ready to draw it if needed. "Can you hear me?" She tilted her head, regarding him with an eerie detachment. For a moment there was silence, save for the faint hum emanating from her transformed body. Then she spoke, or rather, it spoke through her. "You cannot save her," came the voice, layered with overlapping tones that sent shivers down their spines. It wasn't Lila's voice anymore. It was deeper, harsher, dripping with malice. "She belongs to us now." Drake exchanged a glance with Grayson and Mia, silently communicating their shock and dread. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't just controlling Lila. It had fused with her, merging their identities into something neither human nor entirely alien. "We're not leaving her here," Grayson said firmly, stepping forward despite the danger. "Lila, fight it! You're stronger than this!" For a brief moment, a flicker of recognition passed over her face. Her glowing eyes wavered, and her hands twitched as though struggling against unseen restraints. But the parasite fought back, tightening its grip on her mind. With a guttural snarl, she lunged at Grayson, moving faster than any of them could react. Grayson barely managed to dodge, stumbling backward as Lila slammed her fist into the wall where he'd been standing moments earlier. Sparks flew from the impact, revealing the superhuman strength the parasite had granted her. The others scrambled to regroup, pulling weapons from their belts while shouting frantic warnings. "Stay back!" Drake barked, aiming his stun gun at her. "We don't want to hurt you, Lila, but we will if we have to." His words seemed to pierce through the fog clouding her mind. Lila hesitated, her movements faltering as conflicting emotions surged within her. Tears streamed down her cheeks, mixing with the alien luminescence spreading across her skin. "Help me!" she choked out, her voice trembling between her own and the parasite's. "Please, help me!" And then, just as quickly, the parasite regained control. Her expression hardened again, and she let out a blood-curdling scream, a sound that echoed through the chamber like a banshee's wail. Without another word, she turned and bolted deeper into the maintenance tunnels, disappearing into the shadows. The chase that followed was chaotic and terrifying. The parasite heightened Lila's speed and agility, making her nearly impossible to catch. She darted through narrow passages, leaping over obstacles with ease, always staying one step ahead of her pursuers. At times, they lost sight of her entirely, only to find signs of her passage moments later, claw marks gouged into walls, shattered equipment, and faint traces of the bluish light lingering in the air. Eventually, they cornered her in a ventilation shaft leading to the station's external airlock. The parasite must have sensed the trap, because when they arrived, Lila was waiting for them, her glowing form silhouetted against the dim, emergency lighting. "You cannot stop what has begun," she, or rather, the parasite, hissed, raising her hands. Energy crackled around her fingertips, forming arcs of electricity that danced dangerously close to sparking fires. "She is ours. And soon, so will all of you be." Mia gasped, instinctively stepping back. "It wants us too. It's not done with just her." Drake tightened his grip on the stun gun, his face a mask of determination. "Then we'll stop it before it spreads." With a roar, Lila lunged again, unleashing a burst of energy that sent the team sprawling. The force of the blast knocked several panels loose, plunging the area into near darkness. Amid the chaos, Grayson spotted an opening. He grabbed a fire extinguisher from a nearby wall and hurled it at her legs, hoping to incapacitate her long enough to subdue her. It worked. Lila stumbled, momentarily distracted, giving Drake the chance to fire the stun gun. The shot hit her square in the chest, sending her collapsing to the ground in a heap. For a moment, the room fell silent, save for the ragged breathing of the survivors. "Is she?" Mia trailed off, unable to finish the question. Grayson knelt beside her, checking for a pulse. To everyone's relief, she was still alive, though unconscious. The bluish glow had dimmed significantly, retreating back beneath her skin like a wounded predator hiding in its den. We need to contain her, Drake said grimly, holstering his weapon. If that thing wakes up again, we won't get another chance. As they carried Lila back to the medical bay, none of them noticed the faint glimmer of light creeping along the walls behind them. The parasite wasn't defeated, it was merely biding its time. The medical bay was eerily quiet as the team secured Lila to a gurney, strapping her down with reinforced restraints designed for emergencies. Her unconscious form lay still beneath the harsh fluorescent lights, her chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. The bluish glow that had once radiated from her skin had faded almost entirely, leaving behind only faint traces along her veins, like cracks in ice. Drake paced back and forth, his boots clicking against the metal floor. His face was a storm of emotions: anger, fear, determination. He glanced at Grayson and Mia, who stood nearby, their expressions equally grim. None of them spoke. The weight of what they'd witnessed hung heavy in the air. "We can't keep her like this forever," Drake finally said, breaking the silence. "If that thing inside her wakes up again, we'll need a plan. Something better than just shooting her with a stun gun." Grayson nodded, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "Agreed. But first, we need answers. What is it? Where did it come from? And why did it choose Lila?" Mia stepped forward, her eyes narrowing thoughtfully. "It's clearly intelligent, maybe even sentient. It knew exactly how to manipulate her, feeding off her emotions until she couldn't fight back anymore. That forest wasn't random. Those vines targeted her for a reason. Then we go back," Grayson declared, his voice firm despite the lingering tremor of fear. "We searched the area where she found those vines. Maybe there's something there, a clue, a sample, anything that can help us figure out what we're dealing with." Drake hesitated, weighing the risks. Returning to the alien forest meant putting themselves directly in harm's way, but staying put wasn't an option either. They were running out of time. If the parasite regained control of Lila, or worse, spread to others, they wouldn't stand a chance. "Fine," he said after a long pause. "But we do this carefully. Full protective gear, weapons ready, and no one goes off alone. Understood?" Both Mia and Grayson nodded. As much as they dreaded going back into that eerie, glowing forest, they knew it was their only hope. Meanwhile, deep within Lila's subconscious, the battle raged on. She floated in a void of endless blackness, her body weightless, her mind adrift. Fragments of memories swirled around her, images of her crewmates laughing, sunlight streaming through Earth's blue skies, the comforting hum of the research station, but each memory dissolved the moment she reached for it, pulled away by tendrils of darkness. "You cannot escape," the parasite's voice echoed, reverberating through the void like thunder. It was everywhere and nowhere, surrounding her, suffocating her. "You are mine now. Your strength, your will, all of it belongs to me." "No!" Lila shouted, though her voice sounded weak, distant. She clenched her fists, willing herself to fight back. "I won't let you take me." For a brief moment, she felt a spark of resistance, a flicker of her own humanity pushing against the parasite's hold. But it was fleeting. The alien presence surged forward, overwhelming her with waves of icy cold and searing heat, drowning her in sensations too intense to bear. Each wave brought whispers of promises, power, immortality, freedom from pain. Yet beneath the seductive lies lurked something darker, a hunger, insatiable and cruel. "Fight all you want," the parasite taunted. "But you will submit. You have no choice." Lila screamed, her voice raw and broken. Tears streamed down her cheeks, vanishing into the void before they could touch the ground. Exhaustion crept over her, sapping her strength until she could barely lift her arms. Just when she thought she couldn't endure another second, a new voice pierced through the chaos. "Lila!" It was faint, distant, but unmistakably familiar. She turned toward the sound, squinting through the darkness. There, standing amidst the swirling shadows, was Grayson. Or at least, a vision of him. His face was pale, his features blurred, but his eyes burned with determination. "You're stronger than this," he urged, reaching out to her. "Don't give up. We're coming for you." The image faded as quickly as it appeared, leaving Lila alone once more. But the words lingered, planting a seed of hope deep within her battered soul. She clung to them, repeating them silently like a mantra, "I'm stronger than this." Back at the research station, preparations were underway. Armed with scanners, sampling kits, and enough firepower to defend against whatever might be waiting for them, the team geared up for their return to the forest. The atmosphere was tense, every movement deliberate, every word measured. Even the usually optimistic Grayson seemed subdued, his jaw set with grim resolve. As they suited up, Mia approached Drake, her expression troubled. "What if we're wrong about this?" she asked quietly. "What if bringing back samples makes things worse? We don't even know what we're dealing with." Drake sighed, adjusting the straps on his helmet. "We don't have a choice, Mia. Sitting here isn't going to save Lila, or any of us. Sometimes you have to take risks to find answers." Mia nodded reluctantly, swallowing her doubts. She glanced over at Lila, still unconscious on the gurney, and felt a pang of guilt. Whatever happened next, they owed it to her to try. The journey back to the forest was silent, the hum of the rover's engine the only sound breaking the oppressive quiet. When they arrived, the glowing trees loomed ahead, their luminescent leaves casting an otherworldly light over the landscape. The beauty of the place was undeniable, but it carried an undercurrent of menace that made their skin crawl. "Stay alert," Drake ordered as they disembarked, scanning the area with their rifles raised. "And stick together." They moved cautiously through the forest, following the path Lila had described during one of her rare lucid moments. The vines she'd encountered were easy to spot. Their unnatural pulsations stood out starkly against the otherwise serene environment. As they drew closer, Mia activated her scanner, analyzing the strange plants while Grayson kept watch. "These readings are off the charts," Mia muttered, her brow furrowed as she studied the data. "High levels of bioelectric activity, almost like they're alive." "Alive and hungry," Grayson added darkly, keeping his rifle trained on the writhing vines. "Careful where you step." Mia knelt down, carefully collecting a small sample using sterilized tools. The moment she touched one of the nodules, it reacted violently, lashing out with needle-like protrusions. She yanked her hand back just in time, narrowly avoiding injury. "That's enough," Drake said sharply, pulling her away. "We've got what we came for. Let's move." But as they turned to leave, the forest seemed to shift around them. The glowing trees dimmed, plunging the area into shadow, and the chirping of alien creatures fell silent. An oppressive stillness settled over the group, making their breaths echo unnaturally loud in their helmets. "Something's not right," Grayson whispered, his finger tightening on the trigger. "We're not alone." Before anyone could respond, the ground beneath them began to tremble. From the shadows emerged shapes, twisted, humanoid figures covered in pulsating vines. Their eyes glowed the same bluish hue that had marked Lila's transformation, and their movements were jerky yet purposeful. "They're infected," Mia gasped, backing away as the figures advanced. "Like her." Drake raised his weapon, his voice steady despite the situation. "Stay close. We fight our way out." The standoff escalated quickly into chaos. Gunfire erupted, illuminating the forest in flashes of light as the team fought desperately to fend off their attackers. The vine-covered creatures moved with unnatural speed, forcing the humans to retreat step by step. Despite their best efforts, the odds were stacked against them. Just as it seemed they wouldn't make it out alive, Grayson spotted an opening, a narrow gap between two massive tree trunks. "This way!" he shouted, grabbing Mia's arm and dragging her towards safety. Drake followed closely behind, firing blindly to cover their escape. They burst into the clearing where the rover waited, slamming the doors shut just as the creatures closed in. The vehicle roared to life, speeding away from the forest as fast as its engines would allow. Inside, the three survivors sat in stunned silence, their hearts pounding in unison. They had escaped, for now, but the realization hit them all at once. The parasite wasn't confined to Lila. It was spreading. And they were running out of time. The ride back to the research station was a blur of adrenaline and dread. None of them spoke, their minds racing with the implications of what they'd just witnessed in the forest. The vine-covered figures, infected beings like Lila, were proof that the parasite wasn't content to remain isolated. It was growing, spreading, infecting everything it touched. When they finally arrived, the sight of the station brought little relief. Its once familiar walls now felt like a fragile barrier between them and the creeping horror outside. As they stepped inside, removing their helmets and setting down their gear, Drake turned to the others with a grim expression. "We need to quarantine ourselves," he said firmly. "No exceptions. Whatever we brought back from that forest could already be contaminating the air, the equipment, even us." Mia nodded, though her hands trembled as she adjusted her scanner. "I'll analyze the sample I collected. If there's any chance of finding a weakness or countermeasure, it's in that data. And I'll keep an eye on Lila," Grayson added, his voice heavy with resolve. "If she wakes up, or if that thing inside her tries anything, we'll need to act fast." Drake hesitated, glancing toward the medical bay where Lila lay restrained. He trusted Grayson, but the thought of leaving anyone alone with her sent a chill down his spine. Still, splitting their focus wouldn't help. They needed every available resource dedicated to stopping the parasite before it consumed them all. "Fine," he agreed reluctantly. "But stay vigilant. And call for backup immediately if anything changes." In the medical bay, Grayson sat beside Lila's gurney, his rifle resting across his lap. Her chest rose and fell steadily, her breathing slow and shallow. On the surface, she looked peaceful, but Grayson knew better. Beneath the calm exterior, the parasite lurked, waiting for its next move. He studied her face, searching for traces of the woman he'd known, the one who laughed at his bad jokes, who always volunteered for the toughest assignments, who radiated a quiet strength that inspired everyone around her. Now, she was barely recognizable, her features tinged with an unnatural pallor. Even unconscious, she seemed wrong. "I'm sorry," he murmured, leaning forward slightly. "I should have stopped you from going into that forest. This is my fault." His words hung in the air, unanswered. For a moment, he allowed himself to wallow in guilt, replaying the events leading up to this nightmare over and over in his mind. But self-pity wouldn't save her, or any of them. Shaking off the thoughts, he straightened up, gripping his rifle tighter. Then, without warning, Lila's eyes snapped open. Grayson froze, his heart skipping a beat. Her gaze locked onto him, glowing faintly with that same eerie blue light. But instead of attacking, she simply stared, her expression unreadable. For a fleeting second, he thought he saw something human in her eyes, a flicker of recognition, perhaps even gratitude. Then the glow intensified, and her lips curled into a cruel smile. "You can't win," the parasite hissed through her, its layered voice sending chills down Grayson's spine. "Even now your efforts are futile." Before Grayson could react, Lila's body convulsed violently, straining against the restraints. The metal buckles groaned under the pressure, bending unnaturally. Panic surged through him as he realized the parasite was using her newfound strength to break free. "Drake! Mia!" Grayson shouted, scrambling to his feet. "Get in here now!" Moments later, the others burst into the room, weapons drawn. By then, Lila had torn through two of the straps, her movements erratic and jerky. Her glowing eyes darted between them, assessing, calculating. "She's breaking loose!" Mia exclaimed, raising her stun gun. "We have to sedate her again!" "No!" Grayson barked, stepping forward despite the danger. "There's still a chance she's fighting it. We can't give up on her yet!" But the parasite wasn't interested in negotiations. With a guttural roar, Lila lunged forward, ripping free of the last restraint. She moved with terrifying speed, slamming into Grayson and sending him crashing into the wall. His rifle skittered across the floor, out of reach. "Lila, stop!" Drake shouted, firing a stun shot. The bolt struck her shoulder, causing her to stagger momentarily. But the effect was fleeting. Within seconds she recovered, her glowing form radiating with renewed energy. "You cannot harm me," the parasite sneered, advancing on them. "Your weapons are meaningless. Desperation set in as the team retreated, regrouping near the door. They fired repeatedly, stunning shots impacting her torso and limbs, but each blast seemed less effective than the last. The parasite was adapting, learning how to counter their attacks. Mia glanced at the scanner in her hand, frantically scrolling through the data she'd gathered earlier. "Wait!" she cried suddenly. "The readings, they're reacting to electrical currents. If we overload the system, we might be able to disrupt it." "What does that mean?" Drake demanded, dodging another lunge from Lila. "It means we need to shock her," Mia replied, pointing to the medical bay's emergency power grid. "Redirect the current into her. It could destabilize the parasite." Without hesitation, Grayson grabbed a nearby control panel, rerouting the station's auxiliary power to the medical bay. Sparks flew as the circuits overloaded, creating a web of crackling electricity that arced toward Lila. The parasite screamed, a sound so piercing it felt like knives slicing through their skulls, but it didn't release her. Instead, it doubled down, forcing her body to absorb the energy. The bluish glow surged brighter, engulfing the entire room in a blinding light. Through the haze, they could see Lila trembling, her face contorted in agony as the parasite fought to maintain control. "Hold on, Lila!" Grayson yelled, his voice cracking with emotion. "Fight it!" For a moment, it seemed like she might succeed. Her glowing eyes flickered, the alien presence wavering. A single tear rolled down her cheek, glowing faintly before vanishing into the ether. Then, with a final, shuddering gasp, the light dimmed, and Lila collapsed to the floor. Silence fell over the room, broken only by the hum of the damaged equipment and the ragged breathing of the survivors. Grayson rushed to her side, cradling her limp body in his arms. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and the faint lines of light along her veins had vanished completely. "She's alive," he whispered, checking her pulse. "Barely, but she's alive." Drake and Mia exchanged a glance, their relief tempered by exhaustion. They had won, for now, but the victory felt hollow. The parasite's influence had been weakened, but none of them believed it was truly gone. As they worked to stabilize Lila and repair the damage to the station, a new realization dawned on them. The parasite hadn't chosen her randomly. It had targeted her because of her resilience, her determination, her refusal to back down. Those qualities made her both its greatest host and its most formidable opponent. And deep within Lila's subconscious, buried beneath layers of trauma and fatigue, a spark of defiance remained. She didn't know how, but she vowed to fight, to reclaim herself, no matter the cost. Because if she didn't, the parasite would come for them all.